Arguably, not arguably, definitely, lockdown was not the best for children in terms of learning and reduced time in school. The Education Endowment Forum has released data today looking at the longer-term impact of the COVID measures on younger pupils' development, including their reading and maths skills. So what impact has the COVID pandemic had on their education? Well, joining me now is Tony Breslin, the director of the Breslin Policy Education Consultancy. Tony, thank you so much for being here and thank you for looking into this for us and having a strong opinion on it. How have children suffered?
Well, I think the first thing is that there hasn't been one narrative around this. Every child, every family, every class and every school have had a different lockdown. So what we've got to come away from is a kind of one-size-fits-all response. There are some children who actually progressed during lockdown. Of course, overall, it was, the children who are the most vulnerable, who are always those likely to suffer greatest in these situations. And we have to make sure those children in particular get the support they need.
So who are the children who did well under lockdown?
Well, of course, one of the things that we did during lockdown was perhaps, and I'm a teacher by profession, I'm married to a head teacher, I'm really committed to schools in every sense of the word, but there are a significant number of children who've never really enjoyed school.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
Some of those children we found thrived during lockdown. We also found that some of the vulnerable children, particularly in the second lockdown, that schools got into school, found themselves working in the smaller groups that they've always needed. So some of those children made real progress.
So the key workers' children?
Well, actually, the children who were in receipt of pupil premium support for social disadvantage.
Right, OK, so some of the very, very vulnerable, socioeconomically,
if
might
we
have
got
done
them
okay.
into school in the second, which we did in the second lockdown with some success.
Yeah.
They found themselves in the smaller groups that, in a way, they've always needed. And there's some evidence that those children became anxious when they knew everybody was coming back, not because they didn't want to see their friends, but because they perhaps felt they were going back to the bottom of the class.
So let's look at these disadvantage gaps which have emerged.
Yeah.
So year 2, which is about, 7, 8 ages?
Yes.
About that, isn't it?
Yeah.
The disadvantage gap in spring 2022 was around 6 months progress for reading and around 5 months for maths. Year 3 pupils, the gap was even wider, around 9 months progress gap for reading and 8 months for maths. That's what you would normally expect them to have then.
Yeah.
Are they making these gaps up, Tony?
No, they're not being made up. But I think we need to be proportionate about this. I'm chair of Governors at Bushy Primary Education Federation. We're really keen that our children are where we want them to be. But these are children early in their school career. Yeah. We know what they've missed. We're able to measure it. And teachers are working incredibly hard to make that space up. Now, and I have no doubt that the profession has the skills and the schools have the skills to close those gaps, especially for children who are early in their school career. But I'll tell you what I'm less sure about is I don't know how a 6-year-old catches up on a year's missed play dates. Yeah. I don't know how a 14-year-old catches up on not jostling in the corridor in the way that used to drive me mad as a teacher, but was one of the ways in which I learned to be an adult as a teenager. Yeah. So I think what's become really clear during the multiple lockdowns and all the rest of it is the social purpose of schools. You know, in some senses, we have discovered that children can learn well and teachers can use online, in some cases, incredibly effectively. And one of our challenges is to hold on to those COVID keeps and the things that have worked really well. But actually address the social purpose of schools. It is absolutely critical in the wider development of young people. So I'm not saying the maths, I'm not saying the writing doesn't matter, but I'm saying we can measure that, we can quantify it, we can address it. We may need a bit of help with the funding. But actually, the social development of young people, that's what we really need to look at.
I totally agree. And the maturation, if you like, particularly that generation that went from being, say, 15, 16 to being 17, 18 within that lockdown period. Now, those are the years in which you are, going out, having your first snog, right? You're going out and doing all the things that make you into an adult, as you say, maybe getting your going out to have a meal on your own for the first time with your friends, even if it's just the chip shop, you know, all of that stuff that we stopped them doing. What would you say to parents now who are dealing with teenagers who are immature for their years and actually have lost their confidence? The children lost their confidence.
Well, again, we have to say some children will have lost their confidence. Some children who've perhaps needed longer to grow up, in a sense, they'll have been pleased that that's coming along a year later, not a year earlier. So, again, we have to think of particular children's needs. But we do have to focus on the social because we know that children who feel included, who feel content, their learning thrives. So actually, we've got to really think about how we address that. That seems to me to be...
And just one more question before we go. We've got the COVID inquiry going on at the moment, Baroness Hallett's inquiry. There was no provision for the effect on children in the original terms of that inquiry. What optimism do you have now that they will look at the effects on kids?
Well, I know this, that if they don't look at the impact on children, any inquiry that looks at COVID and doesn't look at the impact on children is not doing the job. And we absolutely have to capture the lessons from lockdown now. It's no good trying to... The children have been through this, and tomorrow's adults. So if the inquiry doesn't cover them, we don't learn the lessons for tomorrow.
Well, thank you, Tony, for the work that you're doing. Tony Breslin there, Director at Breslin Policy Education Consultancy. Now,